Hello and welcome to the formal review. Today, we will be having a very special episode. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Formal Review. This is Season 3, Episode 15, and I thank you all for joining me once again. Now this episode is the third in the monthly series looking back at history. In each episode, I, along with a special guest, will be looking back in history at a specific moment and the movie that surrounds that event. Neither the event, the movie, or the guest will be revealed until the episode drops. It could honestly happen at any time of the month, so you must follow me on social media to see when it does. I am on Twitter, Facebook, and the Gram with the same handle of @theformalreview. So today, June 28th, marks the 49th anniversary of Clay versus the United States. As such, this episode will be looking at the 2001 film Ali, starring Will Smith. I will be joined by a good friend of mine,
Huri Irhani,
Esquire. Hey man, how's it going?
Doing well, as well as one can be doing during the global pandemic and where all the days melt together. But otherwise, doing great.
Wanted to have you on because obviously this movie deals with a very significant person, and also there is a very significant court case regarding this man, and I think that I definitely wanted to have a lawyer to come on and definitely talk about this. Another reason why I wanted to talk to you about this movie specifically because, well, obviously the lawyer aspect, but then as well, I think when y'all were in law school, for those listening, my fiance and Hootie went to law school together. That's how we met. And I think when we went to a Sixers game or something, I don't remember, just the conversation that we had about just sports law in general. And I think you were looking into it at one point. I don't remember, honestly, all the details regarding it. I guess, why don't you give like a background of yourself so people listening kind of know who you are? Why did you become a lawyer? Just what type of law do you practice?
So I wanted to become a lawyer ever since I was a kid, even before I knew what, attorneys do, because I knew that they make a difference. They do take really complicated, subjects and matters and, laws and break it down so that their clients can understand. And then based on what their client would like to do, they will help them achieve, whatever goal or objective that they have. So, I think that's a very powerful, kind of power, so to speak, to be able to help people in that way. And they can, effectuate whatever the client wants to do, with their skills and knowledge. So, at the end of the day, it's a very kind of customer service kind of job, and it obviously takes a lot of training and specialization. That is always something that I wanted to do, and, very much living my dream here. And then with regards to what area of the law I practice in is privacy. So I work with companies who have suffered a data incident and, help them to get operational, investigate what happened, and then ultimately comply with the, numerous data privacy and breach notice laws at the state and federal level. And, even if they're international companies that they have, employees or customers in other countries, we can work with attorneys in other countries to, assess, what kind of fallout there is based on the incident for the client. So in that area of the law, things are very new, things move quickly, so it's been a great experience thus far and very happy to be in that field.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely an important thing.
So here's a quick history lesson about who Muhammad Ali was.
Cassius Marcius Clay was born on January 17, 1942 in Louisville, Kentucky. He began training as an amateur boxer at age 12, and at 18 he had won a gold medal in the light heavyweight division at the 1960 Summer Olympics, and he turned professional later that year. He became the leading heavyweight boxer of the 20th century, and to this day he remains the only 3-time lineal champion of that division. He holds records of beating 21 boxers for the world heavyweight title and winning 14 unified title bouts that stood for 35 years. He was involved with several historic boxing matches and feuds, most notably with Joe Frazier, such as the Thrilla in Manila, and his fight with George Foreman, known as the Rumble in the Jungle. The latter was said to be the greatest sporting event of the 20th century, and was watched by a record estimated television audience of 1 billion viewers worldwide. And at the time, it was the world's most watched live television broadcast. Ali has also been known for his trash talking and often freestyled with rhyme schemes and spoken word poetry, and giving some elements of hip hop.
He's a bum. I'm the world's greatest. He must fall in 5 rounds, but if you talk about me, I'll cut it 3.
Over the course of his boxing career, his total fight purse earnings were estimated to be $70 million, which is today about $333 million. Outside of boxing, Ali gained 2 Grammy nominations for 2 spoken word records called I Am the Greatest and The Adventures of Ali and His Gang versus Mr. Tooth Decay. Obviously, the latter was more of a children's dental book. He also acted a few times, and wrote 2 autobiographies. He retired from boxing in 1981 and focused more of his life on his religion and on charity. Paul J. Christopher and Alicia Marie Smith estimated in their book Greatest Sports Heroes of All Time that Ali helped feed more than 22 million people who were suffering from hunger across the world. Prior to retiring, he also was the largest single black donor to the United Negro College Fund in 1967 by giving $10,000, which today is approximately $78,000. In 1974, he visited a Palestine refugee camp in southern Lebanon, where he declared support for the Palestinian struggle to liberate their homeland. In 1978, he visited Bangladesh and received an honorary citizenship. In 1980, he was recruited by President Jimmy Carter for a diplomatic mission to Africa. Carter wanted him to persuade a number of African governments to join this U.S. boycott of the Moscow Games in response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan.
See, America needs Africa. I think this is the best time in the history for all Africans to get together and boycott the Olympics, help stop the Olympics. I'm putting America on the spot since they told me to represent them.
This ended up being, according to Ali's biographer Thomas Hauser, a diplomatic disaster. Multiple governments felt offended that an athlete was sent to discuss a serious political issue. On top of that, a lot of them did not see why they should join the US boycott when it had failed to support the African boycott of the 1976 Olympics in protest of apartheid in South Africa. Ali felt really deceived by Carter as he did not know this, and Carter had sent him, and I quote, around the world to take the whooping over American policy. However, he did convince Kenya to boycott the Olympics, but because of this betrayal by Carter, he supported Ronald Reagan. In 1985, he visited Israel to request the release of Muslim prisoners as a detainee camp, which at the time Israel declined. But in 1984, he announced that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's syndrome, which is thought to be due to his boxing career. However, this is somewhat disputed as well. Since then, he has not even let this stop him, as he remained active in the public eye. In 1990, he traveled to Iraq prior to the Gulf War and met with Saddam Hussein, successfully negotiate the release of American hostages. In 1994, he fought to get aid to refugees afflicted by the Rwandan genocide, and in 2002, he went to Afghanistan as the U.S. messenger of peace. As he got older, his Parkinson's did get worse, and he was hospitalized a few times. Then on June 2nd, 2016, he was hospitalized with a respiratory illness, and then the next day on June 3rd, he passed away from septic shock at the age of 74. At the time of his death, his fortune was estimated to be between $50 and $80 million. And even with him gone now, he is known as the greatest heavyweight boxer of all time, and even some look at him as the greatest athlete of the 20th century. A study in 2015 found that Ali was one of the 3 most recognizable athletes in the United States, along with Michael Jordan and Babe Ruth. His amount of Sports Illustrated cover appearances is second only to Michael Jordan. His legacy goes outside of sports, as he received the Presidential Citizens Medal by President Bill Clinton and the President Medal of Freedom from President George W. Bush. In 2002, he was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for his contributions to the entertainment industry. His star is the only one that is mounted on a vertical surface because of his request that the name Muhammad, a name he shares with his Islamic prophet, not be walked. So in short, Ali has had a huge impact on history, and his legacy continues to this day. Regarding like Muhammad Ali in general, if there was like one word that you would use to describe him, what would it be? And what do you think his overall impact and or legacy has been in history?
That is a good question. Tough question though, describing somebody like Muhammad Ali in just one word. But, if I had to do that, I would probably say bold. From his style in the ring, style outside the ring, his sort of poetic way of talking smack.
He might be great, but he'll fall in 8.
Increasing the overall entertainment value in boxing, his outspokenness against the Vietnam War, tying, everything into the civil rights movement and the struggle of, black and brown people in the United States.
Floyd Patterson and other fighters, they just don't take part. They make $1 million, they get them a Rolls Royce, they get them a nice home, they get them a white wife. Well, I made it, America's great, and the rest of them catching hell, and he won't say nothing. But when one man of popularity can let the world know the problem, he might lose a few dollars himself telling the truth, might lose his life. but he's helping millions. But if I kept my mouth shut just because I can make millions, and then this ain't doing nothing. So I just love the freedom and the flesh and blood of my people more so than I do the money.
You know, he was bold. He was not afraid. He did not fear long-term consequences of, you know, bold words and actions. He just did it. It's almost like he didn't know fear, or at least he, you know, wouldn't let it control or silence him. And his spirit and that kind of boldness about him is still very relevant today as, you know, kind of, I think, a decent example of, you know, what he did in the modern day is, you know, Kaepernick.
You know, I have great respect for men and women that have fought for this country. I have family, I have friends that have gone and fought for this country. They fight for freedom. They fight for the people. They fight for liberty and justice for everyone. And that's not happening. I mean, people are dying in vain because this country isn't holding their end of the bargain up.
You won't even stand up for me in America for my religious beliefs, and you want me to go somewhere and fight, but you won't even stand up for me here at home.
This country stands for freedom, liberty, justice for all. And it's not happening for all right now. These aren't new situations. It's things that have gone on in this country for years and years. There's a lot of things that need to change. One specifically is police brutality. There's people being murdered unjustly and not being held accountable. Cops are getting paid leave for killing people. That's not right by anyone's standards. Men and women that have been in the military have come back and been treated unjustly by the country they fought for. That's not right.
America right now is spending $30 million a day in Asia. Black and white boys are dying unjustly for nothing just to free somebody else. So why should I worry about going to little old jail to free my poor people who's been catching hell here for 400 years?
To me, this is something that has to change. And when there's significant change, and I feel like that flag represents what it's supposed to represent, and this country is representing people the way that it's supposed to, I'll stand.
It's hard to put a black man or any black person in this country in jail, because if you ask the average one, we're already in jail. You know, we've been in jail 400 years.
He, you know, stood up for his convictions, even if it meant his ability to compete at the highest level in his sport here in the U.S., you know, was threatened. And Kaepernick's case, you know, actually might be over. There's a realistic chance that it's actually over for him. So, you know, I think people like Ali, specifically his bold kind of action, his bold words, his fearlessness really impacted a generation of people who also, you know, embody that spirit, including Kaepernick.
Yeah, and did you see, I think just in the past few days, and this is obviously reporting, there's a few NFL teams that are now actually reaching out to Kaepernick actively now. Mostly because obviously, given everything, it's clear of who was right and who was wrong. And the NFL is basically just saving face.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for sure. I think the NFL, or maybe I really should say Roger Goodell, kind of made an executive decision at the top that, you know, it's, despite very recent history, it is okay and it makes sense, certainly as a business decision, to say that Black Lives Matter and, you know, say that kind of all the right things. And, you know, short of apologizing to Kaepernick, they are, you know, trying to at least publicly make amends. So, you know, I guess progress is good. Any progress, I suppose, you know, I'm not going to balk at it. That said, I think they're far away from where they should be and what standards they should be having. And, you know, it's great that they're acknowledging him, I guess, to some extent. Kaepernick, however, the NFL, you know, even a season, you don't play for a season, you never know what can happen. So, you know, my concern would be just that his opportunity to really compete at a high level is over because so much time has passed since he was last given any kind of fair shake at making an NFL roster.
Right, that's for sure. So Muhammad Ali was initially raised Baptist, but he was introduced to the Nation of Islam in 1961. Then in 1962, Ali met Malcolm X, who soon became his spiritual and political mentor. Malcolm X was the nation's main person, aside from Elijah Muhammad, and he was an important role in the evolution of Ali's religious views by really steering him towards the Nation of Islam. And slowly after that, he started to have Malcolm and other members of the nation in his entourage, and this was so controversial at the time that it almost caused his fight with Sonny Liston to be canceled. And some think his victory was due to Malcolm contributing to enhancing the probability of Ali winning by telling him that Ali was invincible. And at the weigh-in, Ali even shouted,
"I'll never lose a fight. It's impossible. Tell him. It's impossible. Never lost a fight in your life. Ask any of my fans when was the last time they lost. I'm too fast. Champion from the crib. I'm the king. King of the champ. Born the champ from the crib.
And according to Dennis and Ateo, Malcolm X firmly implanted that he was invincible. When he joined the nation in 1962, he adopted the name Cassius X and then Muhammad Ali. Muhammad means the one who is worthy of praise, and Ali means most high. Ali stated,
Clay was not my name. Clay was a white man's name. It was a slave name. And I'm no longer Clay. I'm no longer a slave. So now I'm Muhammad Ali.
This new name was not accepted by a lot of people, except a few journalists such as Howard Cosell. He started to become more active on being an antagonist to the white establishment. He stated,
You my opposer when I want freedom. You my opposer when I want justice. You my opposer when I want equality.
But Ali's friendship with Malcolm X ended as Malcolm soon split with the Nation of Islam only a couple weeks after he joined. Ali remained with the nation, but later in life he learned that turning his back on Malcolm was one of the mistakes he regretted the most. Up until his death, he remained a devout Muslim, specifically practicing in Sufi Islam. All this is to say that his religion is what pushed him to be a conscientious objector when he was drafted for the Vietnam War.
So going back to the details of his case, because you kind of alluded to it. So, I mean, I can read a Wikipedia article about like what the case is, and it is a kind of famous case that you kind of learn about in history class, but from a lawyer or a law school perspective, why don't you kind of give like details of the case itself, what happened and everything?
Yeah, sure. So Muhammad Ali...
Voting isn't just going to the polls anymore on Election Day. Options like early voting, mail-in voting, and ballot drop boxes are available to more voters and are growing in popularity. How to Vote is a tool created by Democracy Works, and it breaks down the options your state offers by forecasting a ballot, empowering you to decide where and when to vote. Democracy works best when we all vote, but misinformation and confusion about election procedures have resulted in low voter turnout. How to Vote takes the guesswork out of the voting process. It is easy to use and helps folks from all over the country overcome many of the process barriers to voting. It is committed to helping you vote no matter what. You can use the How to Vote tool to sign up for election reminders, see what's on your ballot, get step-by-step assistance requesting your mail ballot, explore your options for returning your mail-in ballot, check your voter registration status, and find your local polling site and make sure that you have an appropriate ID to bring with you. Decide when and where you'll vote this year at howto.vote.
This is all in the context of the Vietnam War. As the war dragged on here in the United States, it was a very unpopular war. And, in 1964, Ali failed a, kind of qualifying test for conscription into the U.S., armed forces. And after, about a year, and the war was kind of raging on, and they, I guess, needed, more recruits, on the U.S. front, they lowered the standards. So even though he had failed the test, based on low, scores, suddenly after a year, his scores were, made him eligible to be conscripted. So, in 1966, he was reclassified as, being eligible. And once he found out, he immediately announced that he's a conscientious objector, citing many things such as like his religion and the refusal to, fight and, kill on behalf of the U.S., things like that. And he just refused to be inducted into the military. He was a Kentucky at the time. They denied his application. And you have to assume, just America at the time, he was an extremely popular athlete, one of the few black athletes that was, a proud, black man. He didn't try to kind of fit in that way. He kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. So if you ask me, I would say there was a kind of a feeling of kind of making an example of him. He was also a black Muslim, very kind of conscious person. And again, we're talking about the 60s in the United States. So whether it be people, the kind of the public sentiment, the U.S. government, the FBI, there's a lot of forces that were very kind of anti-black Muslim, anti-Black Panther, anti-equal rights. So that is kind of the context all this is all happening in. So the board in Kentucky denied his application to be a conscientious objector, and he appealed it. And when he appealed it, they essentially denied it for the time being. They said, we're going to leave you as eligible, but they kind of kicked the case, the matter, up to the Department of Justice, which strikes me as a kind of a strange move. It might maybe due to the notoriety and, it's dealing with Muhammad Ali. They kicked it over to the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice looked at it and said, you know what? No, he doesn't meet the tests to be a conscientious objector, so his application should be denied. And, you shouldn't have even sent it to us, essentially, they said. And there are three kind of criteria that you have to meet to be a conscientious objector. You have to conscientiously oppose war in any form, your opposition has to be based on religious training and belief, and your objection has to be sincere. You have to hit all three. If you only hit 2 out of 3, you lose. If you hit 1 out of 3, you lose. So the DOJ, the Department of Justice, tells the board, hey, there's no merit here, this should be denied. And then they said, okay, and they just denied it. They didn't spell it out, they didn't explain, hey, you didn't meet the first criteria, or you didn't meet any of them. They didn't say anything like that. They just denied the application, which is, as any lawyer will tell you, a big no-no. It's sloppy. That's one of the few ways that, the government or the decision maker in a matter like this can lose, and that's what actually would happen. So Ali appeals that, and nothing kind of comes out of that. He sues in district court in Texas, where he moved to, and then they rule 4-0 that he's not going to be a conscientious objector as a Muslim minister, which is something that he tried there. So at that point, he's kind of exhausted his options. They tell him to report for induction. He refuses, and he's tried and convicted of willful refusal to submit to induction. He appeals the district court's judgment against him, or the conviction rather, and it goes to the Court of Appeals, and they also agree, and they say no, the conviction is will stand. So then it gets kicked up to the Supreme Court, and there are 9 justices on the Supreme Court at the time, just like there is now, and one of them is Thurgood Marshall, the first African-American Supreme Court justice. However, he recused himself from this case because at the time this was making its way up to the Supreme Court. He worked in the U.S. federal government, so kind of to ensure that there's no kind of appearance of impropriety, he recused himself. And it's as an aside, it's kind of tough because again, he's the first black Supreme Court justice, and I can see that because if he were to vote against Muhammad Ali, I think there would be some sort of cultural backlash, and if he voted for him, I think there would be a different kind of backlash that wasn't as cultural. So anyway, based on people's accounts of the case of the Supreme Court, it was 3-5 against Ali initially for the 8 justices, and then it became 4-4, and then it became unanimous. It went from 4-4, which would have been a deadlock, and when it's a deadlock, it means that the lower court, which upheld the conviction for refusing to submit to induction, would have stood. So essentially, the court said, they came to a decision that, the appeal board, which kind of started this case because everything was an appeal of that board's decision in Kentucky, they did not explain which of the 3 factors he didn't meet, or any ground that they used, or any kind of rationale that they used to make their decision. They basically just, once the Department of Justice said, yeah, this should be denied, they just said, okay, and they just, essentially rubber stamped it saying, hey, this is denied, and, get out of here. You can't do that. That's one of the few ways the government can lose here. So the Supreme Court voted 8-0 to reverse Ali's conviction because the appeal board didn't provide any rationale. So, how can they possibly review the appeal board's decision when they don't even know what the appeal board relied upon? So basically, it's a technicality. He won 8-0 on a technicality. And by doing so, if you think about it, he was an iconic, one of the best, boxers ever, if not the best boxer ever, and he was in his prime. There was a lot of celebrity around the case. So they were able to kind of, quote unquote, be on the right side of history, but they didn't do so by answering, really difficult questions on, race and religion and, real justice, but on a technicality saying, hey, you know what? Appeal board, you have a very low bar to hit, which is explain, hey, he didn't meet one of the criteria, he didn't meet any of them, etc. And if you can't even do that, then, you don't deserve to win, essentially. So that is how they found in his favor. And if you read or listen online, you can listen to the oral arguments of the Supreme Court based on some of the questions that some of the justices asked him.
To what extent do the black Muslims follow the teachings of the Quran? Is this jihad in the Quran the equivalent of the just war?
Your Honor, this is the first time that I had ever heard anybody suggest that black Muslim theology came from any just or unjust wars.
I'm talking about the jihad, which is in the Quran, as a war that the Quran embraces as the kind of war.
Well, that war means a theocratic war, which is the same as the kind of war that the Cinderella War or the Jehovah's Witnesses. They believe in the war of Armageddon, which is a war against right versus wrong.
They didn't ask this to him, they asked it to his attorney. You can see that, if not for that technicality, they wouldn't have found for him. Clearly the feeling in this country and the sentiment was not that black Muslims and Islam in general and the Quran were kind of like, these legitimate religious sources of knowledge.
Yeah, it's definitely more insight than I actually knew. Obviously, you kind of already went into the significance of the trial, its relation to obviously the civil rights movement and how being like a conscientious objector actor. I mean, he obviously has that one quote.
My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother for big, powerful America. And shoot them for what? They never called me nigga. They never lynched me. They never put no dogs on me. They never robbed me of my nationality, raped and killed my mother and father. Well, I'm going to shoot them for what? How can I go shoot them? Them little poor little black people, little babies and children and women. How can I shoot them poor people? I would just take me to jail.
So fast forward to 1992 to Ali's 50th birthday, when he was persuaded to allow a film to be made about his life. The film then went into writing hell for 6 years until Will Smith and Ron Howard were possibly going to star and direct respectively. At this time, Will Smith had already become a big star, breaking out in films such as Men in Black.
You know what the difference is between you and me? I make this look good.
Bad Boys.
Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do?
Independence Day.
That's what I call a close encounter.
And honestly, he rejected The Matrix for Wild Wild West.
Never drum on a white lady's boobies at a big redneck dance. Got it.
He also obviously had modest fame as the rapper The Fresh Prince, along with DJ Jazzy Jeff, and was a small screen star on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air from 1990 to 1996. As of 2019, his net worth was $350 million, and to this day, his roles bring people to the theaters. Will Smith is obviously one of the most successful rappers who turned to act. Other rappers turned actors include Common, the two members of Outkast, Big Boy and Andre 3000, Bow Wow, Tupac, Ice Cube, Ludacris, Queen Latifah, Snoop Dogg, Eve, Mos Def, Yazine Bey, Diddy, and then debatably Mark Wahlberg and Nick Cannon, because, well, they're not the best of rappers of all time. And obviously, Ice-T and LL Cool J are in this list too because they were successful in television. Aside from Will Smith, who would you say your favorite rapper gone actor is?
Yes, I mean, that's tough because, almost everybody you just named, I like at least one or two movies that they have done. And for some of them, that's all the movies they have done. But I don't know, I guess I would say Ice Cube. I mean, he's done, Are We There Yet? To Friday, so clearly he has range, he's kind of really coming to his own, not just acting. And then I guess, you also referenced Mark Wahlberg, Marky Mark. He, certainly is, a great actor, obviously. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. He's a much better actor than a rapper, and that's why his career has kind of blown up. So many good movies, and I'll say, one movie that he did that I really like, one of my favorite movies actually, Four Brothers.
I think that's one of my favorite Mark Wahlberg movies ever. Well, one, I really like the soundtrack of that movie. I think it has Marvin Gaye in it, so a lot of that, and Temptation. Yep. There's just a lot of really soulful music. It has a really good cast, aside from the four main people. It has also what's his name, Chiwetel Ejiofor. He's in Doctor Strange. He's the one that trains.
He's the antagonist in Four Brothers. I can't think of it. And then also, Sofia Vergara is in that movie. But with regards to the music too, I think because it's in Michigan, it's got the whole kind of Motown vibe to it as well, and they really did a good job of incorporating that.
That's very true. Oh, Terrence Howard's in it too.
Oh, that's right. Great movie.
I think I agree that those two actors I think are good. I personally also really like Common. Well, I think he does decent, obviously, action movies. I think that's where his forte is. But then he also contributes, obviously, still on the music side of things. I think he branched out so much more than I think anyone else did. He's an Oscar-winning songwriter now. But I agree that I really like Ice Cube. I think otherwise, like you said, he has a lot of range. Will Smith, I think, would be debatably one of the most successful out of that list, just based on stardom and pretty much him. He's not even making a lot of movies now, as much as he used to be, but now he has the whole YouTube channel and everything, so he's definitely is living his best life, obviously, and he still puts out pretty decent movies. Bad Boys for Life was decent.
The one on Netflix, Bright, that was a pretty good movie.
Yeah, that was good too. I like that movie as well. Before we go into his movies, what would you say are your top Will Smith songs in no particular order?
So I'm gonna go old school, Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff, leaving out, because Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is still one of my favorite shows. I still watch it multiple times a week. Great show. Yeah. So
that can count as a song, because that is a song on one of his albums, so that can count as a song.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So I would say the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, that theme song, and then Summertime, and then Parents Just Don't Understand.
Okay, you got got 2 out of the 3 of mine. The Bel Air theme song, Summertime, and then I really like 1,000 Kisses because it has Jada on it as well, and I love the Luther Vandross sample on that song.
Yeah, for sure. And also too, there was one song that he had. I mean, honestly, like the video. I think even the video kind of is a little bit better than the song itself. I something to the effect of I think I could beat Mike Tyson, or I could beat Mike Tyson if I wanted to. That is a pretty funny song. It's got Mike Tyson in it in his prime. Very, kind of a moment in time. Very, very pretty funny song. So I like that as well.
Will Smith, I think, has he's not obviously one of the hardest rappers out there, but he does well at what he needs to do, and he still knocks out hits. I think he's obviously nowadays been he's gone into almost that J-Lo type of recording artist where he puts out a single every 2 or 3 months or a feature on a random song. He does little things like that just to keep showing that, oh yeah, I can still rap, but I'm not going to be putting out any a full album. I'm just going to show you that I still have it. Going into his film career, given that obviously the Men in Black series and the Bad Boy series are one, what would you say your top 3 Will Smith films are?
So that is also another tough question. Can I give 1 or 2 honorable mentions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my honorable mentions would be, and this is one movie that you talked about earlier, Wild Wild West. I really liked that movie. I remember vividly when it came out. I remember the little, it's McDonald's or Burger King, toys that were, from the movie, the big spider, and I like the movie, and then he's the cultural piece of the movie, the historical piece, the fact that he's walking around the whole movie, riding a horse, shooting, and people think that he's a runaway slave or things like that. So I thought that was a really good movie. Also, Enemy of the State was a really good movie as well. Gene Hackman and this kind of surveillance state, police state that we're in now, and it was very a lot of foreshadowing in that movie where we are now. So those are my 2 honorable mentions, and of course I would name 10 more. Will Smith is such a great actor. And then my 3 would be Men in Black. I would say the first one, great movie, one of my favorites. Independence Day, which is also obviously a very popular movie. Great movie. I think it still holds up in a lot of ways, very ahead of its time. And then I would say Pursuit of Happiness. It was a very different movie based on real events. Very touching story. He had his son in it. Very good movie. So those are probably my 2 honorable mentions and my 3 favorites.
We had some overlap. My honorable mentions are actually Men in Black. I do like that role, but I think because of where the latter 2 where they go, it's
the best of the
best of the best of the best, sir. With honors. He's just really excited, and he has no clue why we're here.
Come on, that's gold.
No, don't get me wrong. It is very, very good Will Smith. Don't get me wrong. It was hard for me to take it off. And then my other honorable mention would be Hancock. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have. That's a good movie too. Yeah.
I like when Will Smith plays that kind of sarcastic type of role. And
what's your name, boy?
Michelle.
You know who I am?
My papa says you're Agnes.
Well, that's not really a nice word to call a person, is it? Yeah, because that could make someone very angry. Maybe hurt their feelings.
You behave like an ass.
You're gonna stop calling me that.
Ass.
Call me ass. One more time.
It's a cool action movie, but my top 3 would be, similar to you, would be Pursuit of Happiness. I agree with everything you said. Whenever I think of Will Smith motivational, I think of that one scene where he's
don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. Not even me. You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it. You want something, go get it. Period.
And then Bad Boys is on my top 3 because that to me is hilarious. And I wouldn't say they're really well-made movies, especially the first 2, but I still really enjoy them. And in short, I really like Bad Boys, but I think one of my top is I Am Legend.
Also another good movie.
And I think that is such a good movie. And it's sad. And next to Pursuit of Happiness and honestly Ali, as we go into it, are some of his actual best acting roles, I think. Now going into the actual movie itself, Ali is a 2001 biographical sports drama co-written and directed by Michael Mann.
The film focuses on the life of Muhammad Ali from 1964 to 1974, featuring the capture of the heavyweight title from Sonny Liston, his conversion to Islam, criticism of the Vietnam War, and his banishment from boxing, and his return to fight Joe Frazier in 1971, and then his reclaiming of the title from George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle fight in 1974. It also touches on some great social and political upheaval in the United States following the assassination of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 68% of reviewers recommending this movie, with a consensus of, though perhaps no film could fully do justice to the fascinating life and personality of Muhammad Ali, Mann's direction and Smith's performance combined to pack a solid punch. Its Metacritic score is 67%, and there have been 3 cuts of this film released. The theatrical cut is 157 minutes, the director's cut is 167 minutes, and the commemorative edition, which is what we watched, is 152 minutes. And I'll let listeners research the specific differences between these films, but the too long didn't read version of this is that the first two dealt more with all politics, romance, and Muhammad Ali's identity, whereas this one focused more on the politics and the identity. But this film is considered a box office bomb because the budget for this film was $107 million, but it only gained $88 million at the box office, so losing $19 million.
So let's go into it. What did you like about the film?
So Ali really did a lot. You know, it captured him, you know, just as a person, him as a fighter, both in the ring and then in his, obviously, you know, famous battle, you know, in the courts to appeal his conviction for, you know, refusing to be inducted into the armed forces during the war. You know, civil rights advocate, anti-war advocate, you know, his different relationships with the different women in his life and capturing kind of, you know, his honest feelings about the different women and, you know, how he saw himself, etc. So it really did capture a lot, and, you know, I applaud them because it's a long list of things that they kind of packed in there, historically, culturally, you know, about him, you know, because they certainly could have made a movie just about the cultural impact, just about him, you know, athletically in his boxing career, or just about the legal piece. And, you know, there are other films and shows and series that try to capture different parts of it, but this movie really kind of put it all together. And then the boxing scenes themselves, Sonny Liston, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, you know, the infamous Rumble in the Jungle, you know, a big part of the movie's there. Obviously, we know Will Smith is not an actual boxer, so that even makes it more impressive because when you watch it, you really get into it, and, you know, you know, they really prepared him. They did really great work on those scenes. Also, the fact that Jada, you know, his wife, was in that film, and also the Howard Cosell Muhammad Ali piece, you know, was really interesting because, you know, obviously their careers are kind of tied together to a certain extent. And when Muhammad Ali changed his name, Cosell, who was a prominent broadcaster at the time, you know, he was one of the first to kind of support that instead of calling him, you know, Cassius Clay, like a lot of people were calling him still for a while.
I stopped liking Cassius Clay. What's changing the name to Muhammad Ali? What kind of shit is that?
Wait a second. A man has the right to change his name to whatever he wants to change it to. And if a man wants to be called Muhammad Ali, God damn it, this is a free country. You should respect his wishes and call the man Muhammad Ali.
His mama named him Clay. I'm gonna call him Clay. Mm-hmm. That's right. I say Clay.
Get out of here.
That's right. He gonna always be Clay to me. I don't give a what change name to. He is Clay. He Clay to me. I say Clay.
Well, then you're a putz. The 3 of you. 3 putzes. You should change the name outside from Mighty Sharp to the 3 putzes.
It was nice, again, the film really did a lot. It captured a lot. Muhammad Ali, you know, who was good in his pieces, you know, LeVar Burton was in there as Martin Luther King, you know, so it really captured a lot, and I give them a lot of credit for doing that. So, you know, there's a lot in there in that movie, you know. Certainly I don't think you can watch that movie once and take it all in.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that this movie, showed like a very true version of who Muhammad Ali was. It's not a traditional biopic in the sense of we see him from a child and then where he grows over the course of the film. And at the end of it, he's kind of getting this like montage of where he goes in life.
I mean, there is something similar to that at the ending, but not exactly that. It ends up being more of a tribute film. I think how this film kind of focuses mostly on this specific window of Ali's life, I think definitely shows all the things that you said, how impactful like his involvement with the civil rights movement, and we've kind of gone into that already. And I think you kind of touched on it, is the acting. I think Will Smith does an amazing job. I mean, there were multiple times when we were watching it that we said he looks like Muhammad Ali in this shot. And you see how, honestly, how jacked he is. His muscles are huge, and you see how much work he put in. And then I didn't even recognize that John Boyce was in this movie. I didn't recognize him at all, and I thought that was great. And like you said, there's a lot of really good actors in this. Obviously, you have Jamie Foxx, Jada, LeVar Burton as Martin Luther King. You also have Giancarlo Esposito as Muhammad's father. You have Nona Gay, who's Marvin Gaye's daughter, is in this as, I think, his second wife, I think, or one of his wives, I don't remember. And going into that was one of the things that I really did like, because a lot of things about traditional biopics is what they try to do is try to create this kind of favorable image of whoever they're telling the story. And that's nice, but you don't really show the negative sides of it. Like I don't know if you've seen it, but Get On Up, which is the James Brown biopic, which is really good. And if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend you watch it. But it doesn't really show too much of how like he actually beat some of his wives, but it kind of alludes to it. Whereas this, I felt, was more just showing you that Ali did love some of these women, but because of how bold and how out there he was, he couldn't be satisfied in a way by just the love of one woman. These romances that he had weren't, not to say they weren't significant, but they weren't that important in the sense of a true biopic, because one of the things about biopics is they try to focus on romances, which I think is what, when this movie was originally released, they tried to focus on that a lot. But like, you kind of get this feeling of, like, we see Jada in there, but then when we were watching it, we didn't really get attached to that relationship because it was there for maybe 10 minutes or so, and then he moved on to the next one, and then later in the film he moves on to the next one. So it kind of actually, I think, gave a more accurate portrayal of Muhammad Ali in that aspect, and I thought that was a very good way to do it, especially with this version of the film being released, I think, the year that he died. So it ends up kind of being more of a tribute to what he actually should be known for, which is the case and his involvement with the civil rights. I like how they kind of involved Malcolm X in this story a lot more. He obviously had a lot of impact on Muhammad Ali and whom he became. So it was really cool to see that kind of relationship be touched on.
Agreed.
Even though I said this in the movie, I didn't like the actor who played Malcolm X, but I think that's also my bias toward Denzel playing him. But I thought it was a good development of a character in showing that relationship. Going back to what I was saying about the tribute, that is kind of a negative in a way, because there's not much of a story arc in the movie. Right. They show his overall significant impact, but they don't go into a lot of the details so much of the case itself. Yeah, he wasn't involved in it like you described earlier. It was more his lawyer. But with this being such a significant case, you would think that they would concentrate on it.
So, I mean, you're right. But kind of like I was saying earlier, the Supreme Court, it was only on a technicality because the government had like a very low bar to hit to win, and they were unable or unwilling to do that. They were lazy. He won on a technicality, and the court was able to kind of give him that win, but without answering any tough questions about race or religion or, the induction, the Vietnam War. They kind of sidestepped a lot of those tough questions and not having to make a decision on that, and we're able to give him the win on a technicality. Okay. So, there wasn't a lot of meat really in that case, Yeah,
that makes sense. It's just like little things like that made me, I think, dislike the movie just a little bit, but it makes sense. I think we talked about this before, was the Martin Luther King. That character in the movie itself had little to no purpose aside from the obvious significance of Martin Luther King being in existence in the story at these certain points in time. The assassination of Martin Luther King, I didn't feel any, significance toward that death within this story, because when the death of Malcolm happens, you see their friendship, and then he's assassinated, and then you see how Ali is affected, whereas the death of Martin Luther King, it doesn't affect him as much. And because it's almost abrupt in the story, I felt that it feels like it almost came out of nowhere if we're looking at just a movie itself and not taking in the actual historical impact of Martin Luther King's assassination. That makes sense. sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's almost like they brought him in to highlight his death, and I agree. I don't think there's much value added to the film by that, and that's probably maybe my chief criticism. One of the reasons why I like the movie is because they try and for the most part tackle a lot of topics and subject areas kind of related to the time and to Ali's story. But that's also kind of the Achilles heel when you try to make a movie about the civil rights movement, him as a boxer, him as a person, him as a husband, and kind of his relationship with the women in his life, the Vietnam War, the involvement of the FBI, Nation of Islam, Black Muslims. It's inevitably it's not as efficient.
Yeah.
The Africa piece, where he's in Africa and he kind of identifies with the people and they identify with him, in Zaire and the whole cultural aspect of that. It's almost as if it's a great movie. I like that they were ambitious in what they wanted to put inside it, the kind of story they wanted to tell, but it's kind of like you almost needed to do a little homework. You need context before you watch this film. If you are not aware of to much extent of the Vietnam War, the Black Muslims in the 60s and 70s and kind of the U.S. government surveilling them, and Muhammad Ali as a person, you may be lost.
Yeah.
This movie would be 6 hours long if they really told the story well and accurately and fully for all those different pieces of the story.
Yeah, this is one of those movies that you can't show it said, all right, we're going to learn about Muhammad Ali in this movie. No, this is one of those things you give a lecture on what happened and then you show the movie as a supplement to that, because it doesn't go into details of, like you said, it's just showing you what Muhammad Ali went through during this time, but there's no details of what's going on in the time aside from quick bits here and there about, like you said, the FBI involvement. Like you said, you have to know about those things already before watching this movie.
Right.
Smith was nominated for Best Actor, Jon Voight was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and Smith lost to Denzel Washington in Training Day. Voight lost to Jim Broadbent in Iris, and it was not nominated for Best Picture this year in trade-off for A Beautiful Mind, Gosford Park, In the Bedroom, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, and Moulin Rouge. Watching this film over 19 years later, do you think it holds up?
I do. I think, especially given the fact that the film itself didn't really get much acclaim, other than some of its leading actors getting nominated at least, and I think that it probably holds up well, and I think it would be better received if it came out now actually than then. It also didn't make much money at the time as well, which is really confusing. I think what it speaks about is actually pretty relevant right now with Black Lives Matter and the struggle in the U.S. and abroad against police brutality, over policing, the justifiability of war and armed conflict around the world. Certainly I think the themes in the movie itself, the acting, I think that holds up for sure. And the lack of critical acclaim and awards won by the movie back then, I think, it is low floor. So I think if it came out now, for sure, I think it would do better.
I think a lot of it does hold up in the sense of that, like we talked about, it has great acting, the messages are there. It may not be the most eloquent version of a story, but I think it's still enjoyable for really anyone to watch for the first time or rewatch that they haven't seen in a while.
Now, I was a big fan of James Lipton's show Inside the Actor's Studio. For those who don't know, at the end of every episode, he would ask a list of 10 questions that was originated by the French television personality Bernard Pivot on his show Apostrophes after the Proust questionnaire. And so to honor his memory, I'm going to continue that. Now, my questions aren't the exact same, twist them a little bit so you get to know a little bit of my guests at the end of each episode. And some of them are a little bit fun. So let's get started.
You've had no preparation for this. The list of 10 quick questions. So you ready?
I'm ready.
Question number 1. How often do you watch movies at the theater? Coronavirus aside.
Yeah. Prior to the epidemic and the closure of all the theaters, I have a Regal pass. So I would say a couple times a month, maybe. Like if you average it out, maybe 3 movies a month, something like that.
How often do you watch movies at home?
That is probably less frequent. I would say like once or twice a month.
So who, actor or director, will make you watch a film no matter what?
For an actor, Will Smith, for most of his movies, I certainly will give a chance. He's a really big fan of him. And then, I would say maybe Scorsese. Obviously a very iconic director, and most of what he's done, I think, is gold.
Do you prefer digital or hard copy movies?
Digital.
What movie-related profession would you like to attempt if you could?
I think it'd be being a writer. I think would be pretty interesting. You know, writing a script, a screenplay, and just that creative process. And I think that would be pretty fun to do if I had the opportunity.
What is your favorite movie or movie genre?
I'd say toss up between a comedy and then a kind of a really intense action movie.
What is your least favorite movie or movie genre?
Maybe a romantic comedy.
Best Batman actor.
Ooh, that's tough. It's not Ben Affleck. I probably would say, it's kind of close between Michael Keaton and Christian Bale.
But you got to pick one.
Michael Keaton.
Is it biopic or biopic?
Biopic.
And last question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear said to you when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Really? You're here?
All right. Thanks, Hootie, for coming on. I definitely appreciate it. Definitely appreciate the kind of lawyer insight to this. It's definitely a good conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate the time and great opportunity to talk about a great film. Great acting, a lot of complex subject matter that they really delve into and tell the story about. So yeah, it's been a pleasure.
We'll talk soon.
Now, what did you think of the film?
And what are your favorite Will Smith movies?
Let me know. Hit me up on social media. The Formal Review is on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The URL is all the same. It's at The Formal Review. Please also subscribe to the podcast on your favorite service. It is on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and really, honestly, anywhere you can find podcasts. Also, I'm always wanting to grow and improve, so feel free to leave a review on your favorite service. I see the numbers, and I do this for you all, and I want to keep it entertaining. I really appreciate everyone supporting me by listening and talking about movies with me online. For those who have contributed financially, I really thank you for supporting me in that way. For those who want to financially contribute, please go to anchor.fm/the-formal-review and click support this podcast. And I thank you very much in advance, and any donation is appreciated. Thank you all for tuning in once again, and until next time, well, I won't say it's in movies, but be safe, wash your hands, and take care, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Formal Review. We hope you'll join us again.